Well, the line is out for Georgia and Ohio State. As you know, yesterday those were announced as one semifinal for the college football playoff, and Georgia is listed as a 6.5 point favorite over the Buckeyes. This is a game that's going to be played obviously in Atlanta at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And it's going to be a challenging fight for both teams. Obviously, Ohio State, though, is essentially playing on the road. The line was listed for Michigan and TCU as well, with Michigan as a 9.5 point favorite. There are some other lines that are involved that I can get to in a little bit too. I want to make sure y'all are taking advantage of the really outstanding deal we've got with Ticket IQ. If you use the promo code DOGPOST10, you'll get a little bit off of each ticket order. It's really, there's no fuss involved with Ticket IQ, much easier to deal with. So take advantage of that. The link is down below. I mean, I thought that Georgia might be a little bit higher favorite, but this is settling in about where you'd think anywhere from 6 to 8. Georgia is pretty good in these positions, just straight up, which I think is the number one thing. I heard Colin Cowherd, I guess I'll talk about this later, but talking about how, Ohio State's going to come in with a really great plan and they're being questioned right now and this, that, and the other. Georgia's had 30 points scored on them the last time they played, which is against LSU. That's problematic, right, for the Dogs. And I think that that's going to be something that they pay attention to in a very big way. So I think, if you're not motivated to play in this game, if you're thinking about Michigan, if you're Ohio State, that is not going to work. You're going to have to deal with Georgia. It's not a lot of fun. But here are some things. I mean, I wrote about this when the story broke. It says, and I'll just read it to you. Georgia's listed as 6.5 point favorite to beat Ohio State on New Year's Eve in Atlanta. The Dogs are 21-9 in their last 30 games, where they are anywhere from a 6 to 8 point favorite in games. So the line can fluctuate slightly. I mean, it depends on a lot of different factors. There's injuries for both teams that you're going to really pay attention to. Anyway, Kirby's teams are 6-2 as anywhere from 6 to 8.5 points, 6 to 8 point favorites. The two games they lost were the first Alabama game in 2021 and the 2018 LSU game. The article goes on to say the line indicates that Georgia has about a 68% chance to win the game. Meanwhile, Michigan has been installed as a 9.5 point favorite to beat TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. That would make them much closer to an 80% chance to win the game. So I think if chalk holds, and we'll see if that's the case, I certainly anticipate Georgia winning this game. I don't think it's a certainty by any stretch. This is the first time Georgia's going to come into a game this season where they're not a double-digit favorite, y'all. I mean, this is their biggest test of the year, and they've had some tests, right? I mean, and they've not always played great in those tests, but they won all of them. They won all of them by double digits, with the exception of the Missouri game. Missouri game is the only game where they didn't win by double digits. Missouri game is the only game that they didn't win by double digits. It's one of 3 games, just going off memory, in the last 2 seasons that they've not won by double digits. It was the Missouri game, the loss to Alabama, and then the win over Clemson. So, Georgia's games have only come down to the final play of the game really once lately, which was the Missouri game. So we're not talking about a team that's really not playing well right now. We're talking about a Georgia team that looks great. Hey, look, it's December 5th. I'm about to run out of Kelee Ringo autographed exclusives for DAWGSTRUCTION. So make sure you're getting that now, okay? Get it now because I'm about to run out of it. But also, if you want DAWGSTRUCTION, make sure you're getting it today so I can get it out to you before Christmas. We've had a really big spike in sales. I had to get a few more books that were, obviously they're not signed by Kelee. But get everything now so that so I can get it out to you. I'm going to the post office today. I go to the post office every single day to get stuff out to y'all. So please get that done. But I think this line looks about right. I think it's maybe a little bit low but really not much to think about. I think Michigan TCU, I would probably take TCU in that one against the spread because I think that, first of all, they consistently play tight games. Secondly, Michigan uh, plays in a way that seems to be conducive to having tighter games than maybe their ability is. I'm not, the style that Michigan plays, leads to tighter games than like Ohio State plays. But when they played Ohio State, they pushed away in the second half. Michigan has been a very good second half team, and so I think with TCU, in watching them, they're not as gifted as any of the other teams, but they've been in so many fights. I think that game will be tighter than the line indicates. I don't know if these lines are going to jiggle around much at all. Um, that's a good question. If Georgia were to face Michigan in the championship game, Georgia would be a significant, or excuse me, if they were to face TCU, they would be a significant favorite in that game. They would be almost a two score. They would be a 16 and a half point favorite. So what they were against LSU. Texas Christian would be a 10 and a half point favorite. Excuse me, 10 and a half point underdog to Ohio State against Michigan. Georgia would be an 8.5 point favorite, so slightly more than what they are against Ohio State. And Ohio State would be a 3.5 point favorite over the Wolverines. That assumes, of course, you're playing on a neutral field, which in this case everyone would be. Georgia is not playing a neutral field in Ohio State. I think that's being taken into consideration. I'm not sure. Georgia's odds to win the national championship actually have gotten better. They were negative 160 before the weekend. I think people sort of processed that information, and it's dropped down a tick. I will check to see what the percentage is to win that game because or to win the national championship because it has gone it has gone in their favor slightly, not by much. Now I can't find what I need to find. I'm sorry, it's gone down slightly. They were projected about 61% chance to win it. Now they're only at 57% chance to win it. And that's directly because of having to play Ohio State. I mean, that's just all there is to it. So you went from playing probably USC, where they 100% would have been a 17, maybe 18 point favorite against the Trojans. I mean, they're in a real fight with Ohio State. And I think that what the, I understand why Georgia fans don't want to play Ohio State. And I think this is the only scenario where Ohio State would want to play Georgia because it's the only way they can get in, right? I mean, Ohio State's opening with the toughest game you can get in the college football playoff. So, you know, it's not, it's a challenge. But um, I think if you go back and watch Ohio State hard, which is what I'm going to have to do over this next week, um, like every team, they have deficiencies. And I think in the case of this game, that crowd is going to matter. And the pattern of the past is going to matter a lot too, which is that Georgia really plays well now in big games. Um, I don't know what you consider a big game, but I'll just go through it real quick from what I would consider a big game. Okay, and this is just going to go back these last couple of years. So the win over number 3 Clemson, obviously that's a big game. The win over Arkansas, that top 10 matchup, that's a big game. I thought the Auburn game was a big game, but I'm not going to include that from last year, okay? The Kentucky game, top 11 Kentucky in Athens, that was a big game. The Florida game last year, I'm not sure we could really say that was a big game because Florida was just not good, but okay. Lost to Alabama, then came out and beat Michigan, played well against Michigan. Did not play great against Alabama in the first half, but dominated them in the second half. In 2022, Oregon game, that was certainly a big game. They crushed them. I would say South Carolina's a big game. I had zero doubt that Georgia would win that game. So I'm not, maybe I shouldn't count that game. Tennessee game was certainly a big game, and they absolutely rolled Tennessee. And then you saw the LSU game, which was a 20-point win over an LSU team that scored 30 points. For Ohio State, Ohio State has had essentially two big games this year. Well, no, that's not true. I'll say three. They didn't play unbelievable against Notre Dame at home, but I thought that was a pretty good win, personally. So that was a 21-10 win. Arkansas State, Toledo, Wisconsin, after either they fired their coach or were about to fire their coach. Rutgers, Michigan State, Iowa, and then the game with Penn State, which was a big game on the road. They didn't play great during the first half of that game. That was not, they were losing at the half. They got the lead in the third quarter by a point, but they were only up one, if memory serves correct. No, excuse me, they were up two going into the fourth quarter, and then they scored 4 touchdowns on Penn State. Now, the bad part about that was that Penn State scored 17 on them in the fourth, but didn't play well against Northwestern, and it just did not played well. They did not play well at the close of the year. The Northwestern game was a real weather game. It was not good, but you couldn't run on them at all. It's sort of the questions you had about the Northwestern game is the questions you might have with Georgia about the Kentucky game, I guess. They smoke Indiana, and then they did not play well at Maryland. I mean, they just didn't play well against Maryland. It just didn't. And then they got rolled by Michigan. I mean, I'm not trying to be dismissive of this team. I'm not. They played 5 home games to start the season. They went to Michigan State, who's not good. Then they were home against Iowa, went to Penn State, went to Northwestern, and went to Maryland. I'd say their best performance on the road was the Penn State game for sure. They did not play well against Maryland. They did not play well against Northwestern. Those were games that should not have been competitive that were. And then obviously the game against against Michigan, they just didn't. They got their brains kicked in. So, I know Colin Cowherd is more of a West Coast honk than a Big Ten honk, but I'm not sure I buy the thinking that he's got on that. I think the line is appropriately listed around a touchdown. I think it might be a little low, but I do want to watch more of Ohio State than I have because I've only really watched a lot of bits and pieces. I saw a lot of the Northwestern game. I saw a lot of the Notre Dame game. I did not see any of the Michigan game. I saw some of the Maryland game, and I saw a fair amount of the Penn State game. So I want to go back and actually watch them quicker to see, but I think it's about appropriately positioned because you know Georgia's Georgia should be favored in this game. Georgia should win this game, but they got to go do it. And I think it's an important time for the Dogs to get ready. And Ohio State's got people questioning them. Look, people are always going to question these teams. It's just what it is. And the question right now is, can Georgia stop Ohio State? They didn't really stop LSU in the second half, and that's what Kirby and them are going to focus on.